In today's painting tutorial, I'm going to teach you how to paint two designs that you can use for Valentine's Day cards this year or just to enjoy and practice watercolors. We have a cherries design with some hearts along with a little bit of a fun chocolate covered strawberries painting, and I hope that you follow along and enjoy this tutorial. So for supplies that I'll be using today for these Valentine's cards will be my Stonehenge Legion paper. This is a cold pressed paper made of 100% cotton, and it's perfect for just about everything watercolor. As far as brushes, the brush I almost always use to start any painting is my Princeton Heritage size 6, and then I may or may not use other ones, and if I do, I'll show you along the way. But that is it. I already have my paint palette, which is filled of my MaimeriBlu paints, and yeah, I have a variety of colors, but I'll probably be sticking to this pink and red range. So let's get started. Let's begin with some cherries. This is going to be a super simple cherries and hearts card. I'm going to do a mixture of my pink, which is Rose Lake, and Permanent Red Light. Any combination of those is going to be perfect. I will get started over here. Let's just begin with some circles, super small, just like that. Along the way, I'm going to mix up my water to paint ratio for these to give some variety. Perfect. Let's go in with some more pink and red. And if you use that little technique to kind of dry brush a little bit of paint off, it can kind of add this little look of like a highlight, which can be pretty to look at. Let's go for a couple more here. Just doing groups of cherries. I want a little bit of a bleed with the stem here, so I'm going to go in with my green mixture real quick, probably a little bit of green gold along with my sap green to create a color that's perfect for the stems. And we are just going to start here with this first one I did, dropping a little bit of green into there for a stem. And let's add a leaf. You can mix up the shapes just a little bit, adding a little bit of variety so they're not the exact same. I'm gonna go through and do the exact same thing just a couple more times, coming back to my pink and red. Just creating circles. To our green for those stems. Now let's move on to the hearts. I am gonna come back to my size 6 brush. The small one I've been using is the same series, the Heritage series. It's just a size 2, also a round brush. And for these hearts, I'm actually gonna use a little bit more of the red than the pink, since these are kind of more into the pinky tones. And we're just gonna do these tiny little hearts, just like that. Let's add a little bit of a highlight to these too. So drying off my brush, coming back to the heart, and just adding or pulling up a little bit of that paint to add the highlight. You definitely don't need to do this, but I like to. All right, the last thing that I'm gonna do is I'm actually going to add some highlight to the cherries, but instead of pulling paint away from those, I'm actually gonna use a little bit of my white gouache. I'm not gonna pull it straight from the tube because I have a little bit left on my palette. It's kind of a mixture here. This is mixtures of lots of different colors along with our white gouache. And if you have a white watercolor, you can use that. I just prefer to use gouache because it's a little bit, it shows up a little bit better when you're doing layers. So this is kind of a little bit of a mixture. It's kind of in the green tone, but I am okay with that. We're just gonna add a little bit of a highlight line to some of these cherries, just to add some interest to the painting. We are going to call this one good. This is going to be a perfect little pattern of cherries and hearts that you can do for a card, or if you just want to kind of experiment with painting during the holidays. This is a super fun one for this time of year. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. I'm going to paint some strawberries, specifically chocolate covered strawberries, and it's probably going to be pretty similar as far as like the colors that we're using, but we're just doing a different fruit. So let's go ahead and get started with the red. And I'm gonna move over onto my paper over here. These ones, we aren't gonna do all the same direction. I'm kind of gonna like switch directions as we go, but let's just get started here with the first one. These do not have to be perfect strawberry shapes by any means. You can do different sizes too. Make sure that they're not all looking exactly the same. You can see how some of this one is bleeding into that one. That was exactly what I wanted. I'm gonna do the opposite. So here I started with a light wash and then went in with my higher pigment to make that bleed happen that way. Now let's start the opposite. This one's higher pigmented. Now I'm gonna go in with more water onto the next one. And let's have this one face down. So we're gonna go like that. And we got all that extra color coming down from this one that's already in there. Let's do the same thing over here. Let's have it go same direction actually. let's go in with our green next. I'm also going to use the size 2. Same kind of color mixture as we did before. I'm using sap green and green gold for the stems. And let's get started at the top here. I'm not being very particular about the placement of these stems. You don't have to either. Now that we have that main paint of the stem, I'm going to go through with a little bit more water and allow some of that to spread so it's a little messier, and also we can get the different values of the green in there by adding more water. Next thing that we're going to do is go in with some of our chocolate, because these are going to be chocolate covered strawberries. Not all of them, but I'm going to add some chocolate to these. And I'm going to mix up my burnt umber, which is my brown color, and I might deepen it a little bit with some of my carbon black to make it just a nice dark chocolatey color. Perfect. Let's come down to this one. And then let's go one more with this chocolatey color. Just getting the end of it. And I want to create kind of like a pinky chocolatey color, so I'm going to keep a little bit of the brown on my brush and come to some pink, and then I am going to dilute this a little bit more. Okay, so we have kind of like this watery pinky color, and we're going to take it over this lightest one right here. Just like that. And let's do the same to this one. This one's darker, so it's not showing up as well. So let's add just a little bit more pink. Alright, I'm happy with that. Let's leave the rest of them as is. And then we are going to go ahead and wait for this to dry, add our seeds, and a little drizzle of more chocolate. For the seeds, I'm actually going to use kind of like a red and brown. So I think that's kind of the most realistic seed color for these. Okay. And let's start with this one. Don't overthink it. Don't feel like they have to be perfectly shaped or anything. You'll only make it harder for yourself. Again, this is my size 2 brush. For these lighter ones, you're gonna want less of an intense color, so just add a little bit more water to that mixture because the seeds are just gonna maybe look a little bit less, just a little more intense, and we don't really want that. I went ahead and grabbed my white gouache straight from the tube for this final part of the chocolate drizzle because I want it to be a little bit more pure of a color, but I barely have any, which is fine. I have enough to make it work. There's a little bit of pink still in my brush, but for the most part it's pretty white, and once I go ahead and apply it, it's probably going to mix a little bit anyway. So let's get started down here. Perfect. Nice. Let's actually do a sprinkle for these last two. I'm gonna go ahead and flick the brush right over top. If it's not coming off, it might need a little bit more water. Perfect. And let's do some pink sprinkles. Okay, this is looking really cute. I think these two are gonna be pretty much done. Again, 2 card designs that you can pretty easily achieve. Just break it down into the steps, practice with the dark colors, with the more diluted colors for the bleeding to happen more naturally, and then you can do the opposite. You can go light with the dark and just see what happens. I hope that yours turn out and that you are happy with the results. Make sure to follow me on Instagram and subscribe here on YouTube if you would like to see more tutorials like this with me. And I will see you in the next one.